Okay, that's the meeting recorded. So I'm just going to run through the sedierant. Councillor Burns, Councillor Callaghan, and I can see that I can see that already joined the meeting is Councillor Carmichael, Councillor Chalmers, Councillor Craig, Councillor Devlin, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Falconer, Councillor Horn. Have you joined the meeting? Nope. You can see who, we have Councillor Grant Hose at the meeting, Councillor Lowe, Councillor McCreary. Do we have Councillor McKeever? Councillor McGuigan? And I can see we have Councillor McLachlan present. We have apologies from Councillor Naylan. I can see that Councillor Nelson is present. Councillor Razak? No. Councillor Ross is present. Councillor Thompson is present, and Councillor Wilson is present. Can I also just advise that we also have present today Chief Inspector Lex Bailey and Inspector Roger Bond, and officers present are Rhonda Leaf and Stuart MacLeod. So I'll pass you now back to the chair for today's business. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth Ann. I'm now going to go to declarations of interest. No one get any declarations? No. I'll then move on to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting, and I'll pass them as an accurate record of that meeting.
Second the chair.
Thank you. We now go to item 3, Police Scotland report, presented by the Chief Inspector Lex Bailey and Inspector Roger Bond. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very brief message from myself before I pass over to Roger to give our full update. And Roger is hopefully going to put a presentation up. There you are with regard to it. But it's just to say that we have a policing plan which has been agreed by South Lanarkshire and North Lanarkshire for the first time ever, because it meets the needs of the people of Lanarkshire. It's been agreed, and we will work towards this. Roger, myself, and Brian Lindy, who's the inspector for Larkhall and Clydesdale, that some of you will already know, are working very, very hard to deliver on this. But without further ado, I'll pass over to Roger to take you through this presentation, and we'll take questions obviously at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Lex.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can someone confirm for me you have the presentation on the screen?
Yes, you do, Roger.
Yes, we do.
Right, thank you. I don't have it on my screen, so it's going to be a little bit. If you give me 1 second, I'll try and get it up so I can move it on.
Yeah, it's disappeared from our screens, yeah. I think, the presentation. So you need to bring it back up again.
Inspector Bond, if you're unable to see it on your screen, I can share it if you wish, if you just let me know when you need to move to the next slide.
Sure, Roger.
All right. Unfortunately, I'm not getting it on my screen. If someone else can share it, and I'll happily just ask you to click on the next slide.
Yep.
If that's okay.
If you can just unshare that just now then, please, and then
absolutely.
I'll try and call it up. Not unsharing just now, no?
No, it's not letting me.
Roger, I think I've got it now. So you're on the first slide, reducing violence and disorder.
Okay, I'll happily wing this blind then, if that's okay with everybody. Okay,
I'm in charge.
Okay. This is going to be interesting. Right, hopefully on your first screen you have Scotland Policing Plan 2020-2023. As mentioned, my name's Roger Bond. I'm one of the 4 community inspectors for South Lanarkshire, and I'm based at Hamilton Police Office. For approximately the next 10 minutes, my aim is to cover the main points of the policing plan for 2020-2023 and how this will be implemented in your local areas. After consultation with local communities, partners, and by reviewing emerging crime trends and threats, Police Scotland have identified 4 main priorities. On your first screen, the first priority is reducing violence and disorder. And this includes violent crime, firearms and offensive weapons, hate crime, and antisocial behaviour. Our violent crime detection rate within this subdivision currently sits at 75%. Locally, one of our hotspots for violence and disorder used to be the Hamilton Central bus and train station. Traditional methods of dealing with this disorder included designated patrols, use of CCTV assistance, community wardens, and our BTP colleagues, linked with a balance of education and enforcement for those responsible. Since COVID, our disorder calls for this location have dropped to 2 calls since the end of October last year and 48 calls for the entire year. Since December last year, one of our current partnership approaches towards addressing violence and disorder involves a weekly meeting with the Fire and Rescue, the Antisocial Investigation Team and South Lanarkshire Council, where we identify our top 20 repeat hotspot areas, addresses or individuals. Police then visit these nominals or locations during the early evening on a Friday and Saturday to ensure that they are aware of their antisocial behaviour orders, ensure that no COVID regulations are being breached, and provide additional patrol to the key hotspots. Each individual and location is then visited again that same evening. So during December, we conducted 275 such visits in Blantyre and Hamilton and 164 in Lark Hall. The next slide refers to our second priority, which is public protection and protecting people at risk. This includes sexual crime, domestic abuse and gender-based violence, adult and child protection and road users. Public protection is an area of policing where, due to an increase in demand, we have placed additional officers into specialist departments. These departments located within Lanarkshire include our Divisional Rape Investigation Unit, our Offender Management Unit, Family Protection Unit, Domestic Abuse Unit, Concern Hub, and our PPU Intelligence Development and Proactive Units. So tackling domestic abuse is always a focus for us, and the use of right to ask, power to tell, where we share information about an abusive partner's past with a potential victim in order to hopefully protect them, was utilised 212 times in the past year across South Lanarkshire. Another safety measure we employ is that when a person is released from court for a domestic offence and has bail conditions imposed, we deploy officers to speak to the victim, ensure they're aware of the conditions and that they are content with the safety measures in place. Cybercrime is another area that continues to increase across Lanarkshire, as it does right across Britain. As technology develops, criminals are constantly looking at new ways to exploit this for criminal purposes, often targeting our vulnerable groups. In Lanarkshire, we now have a dedicated digital media investigator to assist officers in investigating and detecting these types of offences. The next slide, which is the third priority, refers to tackling housebreaking and acquisitive crime. So this includes domestic housebreaking, commercial housebreaking, rural crime and vehicle crime. Our detection rate for this type of crime has increased by 7% in the past year. Ideally, we try and address this aspect of policing firstly through prevention, which includes utilising the services of our community safety officers and other partner agencies. All crimes of dishonesty are reviewed daily by our senior management team within the subdivision, and thereafter any undetected offences are allocated to our DAVRU team. This has allowed us to upskill our officers in this area and focus on this type of crime, which clearly has a massive impact on victims. Recently, this DAVRU team, working with our colleagues from Ayrshire, reported a 43-year-old male with 15 housebreaking offences, mainly from wind farms. Another male currently in jail in England is also subject of a number of reports of local housebreakings and robberies within Hamilton and the wider Lanarkshire area. Closer to home, a local teenager from Lark Hall is currently being reported for approximately 13 charges ranging from housebreakings, fraud, common theft and theft of motor vehicles. Locally, my community officers recently identified and dealt with a chop shop based in Blantyre where they recovered not only stolen vehicles but industrial tools reported stolen from as far afield as London. On the next slide, the final priority refers to reducing the harm caused by substance misuse. This includes your drug deaths, your drug supply, your drug production and alcohol misuse. We are all aware of the devastating impact drugs can have on individuals and communities. And to tackle this, Lanarkshire Division established a dedicated drugs team capable of developing intelligence to the point where executive action could be taken. This team are located in a central location, enabling them to respond to emerging drug trends and threats across the division. To ensure this unit is not one-dimensional and only focusing on enforcement, Safer Communities Department were consulted with regard preventative measures that could be adopted to encourage and support drug users in coming off drugs. Officers will speak to persons with addiction issues and make them aware of the support available from partner agencies such as your Community Addiction Recovery Services for those residing within South Lanarkshire. Prior to the COVID restrictions being implemented, the unit had seized and removed in excess of £7.2 million worth of controlled drugs from the streets of Lanarkshire. The operation has also had a huge success in relation to proceeds of Crime Act seizures, where cash and criminal assets valued at £932,000 were identified and seized by police. Due to the global pandemic, we have had to look at how and where we deploy our resources, ensuring that the public and our officers are protected. However, drug enforcement has continued, and even in the last few months alone, we have carried out successful warrant executions in your local area. We recently seized over 31,000 illegal tablets and a number of firearms from a property in Lark Hall. We've got over 1 kilo of cocaine from a property in Lesmahago and 6.7 kilos of herbal cannabis from a property in Forth. On the next slide, I would like to spend a few minutes just to cover some of the other recent ongoing initiatives and examples of partnership working in this subdivision. The Salvation Army run a homeless accommodation at Barrack Street in Hamilton. Once set up, police had an obvious interest and we immediately set up some great working relationships with the staff within. Prior to the current COVID restrictions, my officers regularly visited the home during their patrols. I still hold a monthly Teams meeting with the senior management and the South Lanarkshire Council homeless coordinators where we discuss all police calls to Barrack Street and any potential concerns we may have over certain residents. Police Scotland, working with other agencies, previously conducted fortnightly visits to all the residents, and this was partly to enforce the current no drugs policy for the residents, but also to assist introducing some of them to members of other organisations such as the Beacons or similar drug and alcohol support organisations that might be able to help. And when restrictions allow, we intend to reinstate these visits. On the next slide, another local partnership initiative is the Burn Bank initiative. Part of this initiative includes the funding of an unmarked vehicle. We have had 3 to date, so I can't see the screen, but I'm assuming you got a picture of a car there. Don't worry, that's not the one we've currently got. Having access to the unmarked vehicle allows my officers to adapt their policing approach where they can switch between high visibility patrols and discreet inquiries. These inquiries can include visiting the vulnerable members of the community we mentioned on the slide regarding public protection and protecting people at risk. For example, when conducting offender management checks, we're able to attend and visit victims of domestic abuse without them having the stress of a marked car or uniformed officers attending at their home. There is also the obvious advantage that it allows us a greater opportunity to gather intelligence reports regarding illegal activities. We utilise the vehicle when executing warrants and conducting stop searches. This element of surprise has increased our recent positive detections in relation to drug, alcohol and weapon seizures. On the next slide, this was a recently run police food bank. And prior to the 14th of December, PC Mark Plasto and Daniel O'Hara, 2 of my local officers, went round collecting donations from a number of local businesses with a view to holding a local food bank within the Gilmore Church. They opened the doors for a period of 1 week until the 18th of December, during which time they had handed out 133 larger packages of food and gift items. Contributions came from the local residents and businesses, such as Morrison's, Lightbodies, Tunnocks, Alec Young Bakers, McCall's, the Scottish Fire and Rescue, Boots, the Day-to-Day and the Cost Cutter in the Burnbank Centre. The few remaining bags which were left over on Friday were taken to St Paul's in Whitehill, where staff there had identified a number of families they believed in need of assistance. In addition to the food distributed, officers also took a number of referrals for external organisations such as your social work, your local baby clinics and the beacons. The final slide, which hopefully you'll be seeing a picture of police spec quad bikes. Issues of person causing annoyance in quad bikes in the Larkhall and Clydesdale areas have been ongoing for many years. Between August 2018 and 2019, there were over 167 reports of antisocial behaviour involving dirt bikes and quad bikes in the Clydesdale and Larkhall areas. Last year, elected members were successful in securing funding from various community councils and landowners, and with that, 4 quad bikes were bought and gifted to Police Scotland. On behalf of Police Scotland, I would again like to thank you for this. These bikes will be a significant tool in tackling the issue and will allow officers to access areas which have previously been inaccessible due to the terrain. This will hopefully resolve this issue and improve the quality of life for local residents. As well as the proposed local initiatives over the summer weekends, these bikes can also be used to tackle other antisocial behaviour, including youth disorder. They can assist search for missing persons, high visibility patrols in previously hard to reach areas, including public parks, public engagement at gala days and community events, and they're also a tactical option for us at larger events such as fireworks. On my last slide, that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm free to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. That was
Mary.
Yeah, could hold on a wee minute, Joe. That was just that was informative. That presentation, and I'm glad to see quite a few of the initiatives. The one in regards to gender-based violence and the Burnbank initiative and what's come out of that. That was excellent for the 2 points that I've picked up. But I'm going to open it up to the committee. And who would like to come in? Joe, you want to be first?
I don't mind, Mary. Yeah,
Really?
Lex and Roy, I would like to speak to you, but no here the day. I would like to speak to, I tried to get through to Hamilton Station the other day there and couldn't get them. The thing being is that the riots up in Netherwood, it's unbelievable. Round about where the football parks are, they're running riot. They're also having they're graffitiing the bus shelters and whatnot. I think they've moved from Hamilton up to Etherwood now.
Joe, are you wanting to speak to the officers in private?
Yes, they can phone me.
Joe, I'll phone you tomorrow, Joe, if that's okay.
That's fantastic, Lex. Thank you.
Okay, right, Lex, I'll speak to you then.
Anyone else?
Chair, we have councillors Nelson, followed by Carmichael and Councillor McCreary.
Right, can I have Councillor Nelson?
Hello.
Hi,
Mary, just served my hand up first and through well there. And
I
don't know if you're having trouble with this. No, I'm in trouble with this laptop. Just seeing if you could hear me or you seen it. That was all. I'm willing to wait to get in.
I didn't see your hand. Right, I'll put on the participations and then I'll have a better idea. Right. Okay, and you come.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, thanks. It's just about the partnership working, for example, antisocial behaviour with house and antisocial team, etc. We have got a lot of antisocial behaviour and people are really anxious. And the perception is, and it probably is a lot better results than we're seeing, but people seem to think that even though we have they working together, they're very poor results, very little happens to people involved in antisocial behaviour. You tell us, is it a good success rate we've got to prosecuting people or moving them on or whatever, and is there any way we can, or anything we can do to work better and achieve better results?
Okay, Ben.
Good, sir. Thank you very much for that question. As Roger alluded to, we do have have additional patrols at the moment, which are coming to an end, unfortunately, which are joint patrols with South Lanarkshire Council officers, and that's right across South Lanarkshire. It's not just in the Hamilton and Larkhall areas. And that's been very successful. It's basically a preemptive strike to say, look, you've been identified as somebody who's antisocial, and it's not a conclusion we come to ourselves. It's something that we come to jointly with the hub, and we work together to identify these individuals, and we go and visit them early on a Friday to say, look, this is when you're most likely to misbehave. So if we do get anything, that you've already had your warning, so it's a kind of, that's you've had your strike, so we will take action right away. In terms of the prosecutions, and any further than that, I can't speak for that, because obviously that's in the hands of the Crown Office, and these are things that as a result of COVID have been moved down the kind of priority list within the Crown Office, which makes it really difficult to police in addition to that. However, should we make an arrest with our new powers, we've got powers to undertake people, and we give those individuals conditions to behave themselves, and if they're not adhering to those conditions, then obviously we can take further action in relation to that. But Roger and his team we do identify these people. We do speak to the hub and the housing and antisocial teams are really, really supportive of us, and it's a great relationship we have moving forward for that. So, Councillor Thompson, if you do have any issues at all, please let us know, and please try and give you a wee bit of reassurance that we are on this, and we do work very hard on antisocial behaviour, because we realise how important it is. It has been exacerbated by people staying in all day and all night, and adhering to the government restrictions, which on the whole people are, and they're living through the wall for their neighbours, or down the stairs for their neighbours that they've never had to suffer before, because they're closing doors at all times of the days and nights that's never had before. So we've got a whole load of new complaints and new people that are coming to our attention, and it's not necessarily antisocial behaviour, it's just behaviour that people aren't used to.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Inspector. Thank you.
Okay, right, I'm going to go back to the list. I've now got it in front of me. So, Richard, you're top of the list.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks both of you for the presentation, which was very informative. First of all, just want to give a thanks again to Police Scotland, especially in Larkhall, a community policing team within Larkhall. Personally, my own personal thoughts is are outstanding, and a credit to Police Scotland at this time. I do have some questions. I'm going to try and remain a bit political away from it, but we're talking about enforcement, antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, drug enforcement, and I've worked in a few cases with the local problem-solving team in Larkhall regarding antisocial behaviour, and what we found was that the police were obviously lifting the gentleman, taking them to court, or arresting them, taking them to court, and then they were getting back out again, which didn't do anything for the community. At the same time, so it's frustrating for them as much as it is for the community. So again, I'm trying to remain a bit political neutral at this point, but there is issues I would perceive that you are finding that frustrating, that you can't, I'm not saying you can't deal with it, but you've only got certain powers, but it doesn't look good from a community point of view. Secondly, is in regards to your drug enforcement, and I was just looking to see if you have any statistics around drug-induced mental health issues and psychosis. It's mostly from illegal highs or any drug-induced psychosis. And how does this fare in South Lanarkshire? I know it's been a national picture across Scotland and down south that we do have increasing high numbers of drug-induced psychosis. I was just wondering how that percentage and what you have had to deal with in South Lanarkshire. And lastly, is just a great achievement on the quad bikes. I know the guys had fun when they were doing their training. I spoke to them the day after. Some of them were pretty exhausted, but they seemed to enjoy it. I was just looking to see a wee bit more information on that and how far you can go in pursuit after them. It was always the case when it was a quad bike or a bike, a motorbike, the police would never chase them. because you don't know who's on it. Could be a young youth and you don't want anything to happen to them. So how far can you actually take that pursuit now with the quad bikes? Can they go after them, or is it more or less back to the problem solving? We try and catch them on the bike, but not chasing them, sort of thing. So just a wee bit more information again round about that. Thanks.
Councillor, I thank you very much again for your question. I'll take the kind of first one first, if that's okay. In terms of us dealing with antisocial behaviour and the like, yeah, there is a frustration in relation to what happens after we've dealt with them. But as you quite clearly say, that we are limited in what we can do and what we can't do, and then that's where we rely on partners, and where South Lanarkshire Council has been particularly helpful with us in moving things forward and trying to resolve the issues. We're as frustrated as anybody else, particularly, and share the community frustrations in relation to the disposal of these individuals and how many chances they seem to get and how they come back into the community without seemingly anything happening to them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing is happening to them. They may be on some kind of warning and some kind of bail condition or whatever. And if they do have a bail condition, then we will police that, and we will police it. There's a number of individuals, particularly in about the Larkhall area, that I'm very much aware of, that have got 7 till 7 curfews. And we're at their door every night, making sure that they are in and where they say they would be and where they're supposed to be. In relation to drug-induced psychosis, it's not a statistic that I'm aware of in relation to it. And anecdotally, and I'll repeat, it's anecdotal that we do have issues with these things. However, our biggest issue at the moment, I would suggest, is with what's known as street Valium, which are homemade tablets and which seem to be at the root of not just antisocial behaviour but dangerous behaviour from people of all ages. It's not just young people of all ages who are getting hold of these tablets and taking them in vast quantities that you wouldn't believe. So that's where our kind of focus is in relation to that. And in terms of the quad bikes and the chasing and the pursuit protocols, I'll hand you over to Roger in relation to that, because he is genuinely as a proper traffic expert.
Thank you, sir. Councillor, with regards to your question, for me, the first part of this is it's about having the high visibility patrols in the area and act as a deterrent. So we know the areas that they're going to. So if we can get there first, then hopefully we can prevent any crime from happening in the first place. They can see us there, and that will stop them going to that area. However, if they don't and they take off, then basically what we have to do is carry out a risk assessment. And what I mean by that is, if we happen to know who the person is and we can build up a picture, we can identify who the individual is, take photographs of the bike. We're not allowed to pursue under those circumstances, but we are allowed to go to the address afterwards and seize the bike and then report the individual for court. So I suppose the first part of it is to get in there, be seen and beat them to it. After that, it's about building an intelligence picture of who's there, what type of vehicles it is, how did they get there, how were they transported there, was it on the back of vehicles, or are they using a track to get there? But each individual movement after that, as far as pursuits are concerned, it's a risk assessment by the officers, and we'd have to take everything into consideration. If it's through a play park with kids there, we're not chasing them, but we will build up a picture and we'll hopefully get enough to go to their addresses afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move to Andy. Andy, you're next. Is Andy? Oh, his hand's down. So I'm going to Alan Faulkner. Alan, you're next. You need to take yourself off mute, Alan.
I'm trying to do that, but these laptops are not too good a standard as we're all funning out.
I know. That's you. That's you now. So you've muted.
Right, that's me. Just two questions, quick questions. Inspector Bond, it's regarding in your first presentation violence disorder at Hamilton Central Station and that, and you had the cooperation of the community wardens. Do you have the community wardens working alongside you in partnership with various anti-violence and social disturbances? The reason I'm asking is that a forthcoming paper to the council is recommending doing away with community wardens, and just to see how valuable they are to use. Thanks. Hello?
Yes. Lex or Roger, who wants to answer that?
Roger's muted.
Oh. So yeah, Roger, you're muted.
Chair, I think Lex Bailey might be frozen at the moment by the looks of things.
All right.
Apologies, I something went badly wrong for me there, and everybody froze on the screen, so I didn't hear Councillor. It was just as Councillor Faulkner was about to speak. I've got two questions. Was the last thing I heard.
Alan, sorry. Do you want to repeat?
It's okay. It was your mention of using community wardens in regard to the situation at Hamilton Railway Station and that. And do you have quite a close association with the community wards and using them and acts against violence and that? The reason I'm asking is that there's a paper coming to council soon where we're going to do away with our community wardens. And I'm just wondering whether you were consulted in that issue.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't consulted. Sorry, Councillor. I certainly wasn't consulted in that issue. It may have gone above me in relation to that. However, we do have a very good relationship with the community wardens, and I would be sorry to see them going because it is another really valuable tool.
Alan can also reiterate that it's a paper going forward to the council. It's proposals. It's not that it's up for discussion. So they're not tablets of stone at this moment in time.
Thanks for that, Chair. Well, obviously, consultation is very important when you're discussing the papers at a future date. If I could come on to my second question.
Yeah.
It's a bit parochial. It's in regard to Clarkwell Terrace and the chair in my ward, which is predominantly 16 houses with elderly people with a lot of problems with youths going round banging doors at night and that. We've asked that the elderly people press their thing with the alert button, and the alert people should inform the police to hang around. But I've been hearing a couple of times that the community police of that are phoning the old buddies up and no getting that visit. And it was just to see if we had a better way of dealing with elderly people, not just in Hillhouse, but in general. I'm quite confused.
Oh, I understand that and I appreciate that, and we're well aware of Clarkwell Terrace and the kind of demographics of the occupants there. I would suggest that it's not the community police that are phoning them up and saying we're not coming. It will be our control room, and it will be as part of the risk assessment that's going on just now in relation to every call, which is what we call triaged, to understand if something's ongoing at this moment in time, if it's needing how the priority of the call, and it's done centrally. The fact that it's Clarkwell Terrace won't flag up as being a vulnerable individual until somebody tells them that. So it would be far better for them, as you say, to contact the alert and get in touch with us personally through the email system or through personal contact with their own community officers, rather than the 101, which will be a frustrating way of them having to be dealt with, because particularly in these COVID times, we don't want to be, because we'll go from, we could be at 10 different houses in one night and taking COVID from one house to the next without actually knowing it. So we're reducing our footprint in people's houses and at calls for that reason, as well as obviously for our own safety in relation to the pandemic. But my advice would be to get in touch with a central point, which if that's the alert, then that'd be ideal, and they can contact us and we'll have something, but we need to know about it, and then we can deal with it proactively for the following night.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that obviously does need to be processed and managed, so as that the tenants in Clarkwell Road do feel that they are being listened to and they're being supported in the best possible way going forward. So thanks for that, Alan. Right, Kenny, you're next, if you want to come in.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to add my thanks to the officers for coming along today and for the presentation. We've had the pandemic now for just about a year with lockdowns on and lockdowns off and so on. Could I ask a general question about policing and how it has changed over that period? And presumably it has. For example, I mean, the pubs aren't open, so the officers aren't attending pub issues, I don't suppose. However, I understand that people are still drinking more at home, perhaps giving more domestic violence. So maybe just a general question, how the job has changed over the past year. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor. The job has changed, and it's changed, as you say, in respects of the public space issues that we have to deal with, particularly around about licensed premises. Our Friday night and Saturday night patrols have changed completely from what they have been traditionally. What we do have now is a number of more domestic issues, violence within the homes, gender-based violence in the houses. And it's far more difficult to prevent. We do deal with a number of assaults that are coming from that. We also have, as Roger mentioned as well, the cybercrime issues with a lot more sexual offences, which are non-contact sexual offences as a result, which people on the internet and finding themselves in a predicament whereby they're being bribed, blackmailed, extorted of money due to having posted pictures of themselves in compromising positions. That's an area of business that's increased dramatically. Our call volume has not decreased. I have to say that we are still as busy, but what's now, and it will be recorded in next year's figures, the number of disorder calls that have been recorded in the period of the pandemic will have increased significantly. That is because the nature of the calls for COVID breaches are recorded under disorder at this moment in time, because there wasn't a specific coding for COVID breaches. So we have daily phone calls from people reporting their neighbours, reporting members of the public for COVID breaches. We are dealing with people on a daily basis ourselves proactively in relation to COVID breaches. But on the whole, we have over 100 calls for this subdivision on a daily basis, anything between 100 and 150 calls. And yeah, I would suggest that maybe 30 of them a day are relating to COVID and some issue surrounding that. A high number of concern for calls, concern for people whereby somebody's phoned to say that they're concerned about the mental health of an individual they haven't seen for a while, and potentially they're self-harming or worse, or just not looking after themselves properly. So those calls have increased dramatically as well, and the police presence at them. We have to be very, very careful now. Our PPE gear, our personal protection equipment, as we stage it, and depending on what we're dealing with, officers should be wearing their masks, surgical face masks in the vehicles when they're with each other in the cars. But when they're dealing with the public, there's a more substantial protection equipment available for them. So yeah, everything has changed, and it's changing on a, if not a weekly basis, a daily basis. But we have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect the public from us, because we could be, as the saying goes, we could be super spreaders of this virus, whereby we're visiting so many people, as I said before. But yeah, things have changed, and we're adapting as best we can. But we've been subject to an awful lot of absences as well due to COVID, and self-isolation, and people and our officers being unwell as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have, this is just on the gender-based violence, because that's increased, do we have a code if you're in touch with people who are suffering gender-based violence? Do they know how to get in touch with you if they're needing to flee that domestic abuse?
We work very, very carefully. We've as Roger said, it's an increase in business area for that, and we've resourced that quite substantially, particularly during this time. We work with partners, whether it be domestic abuse partners, Women's Aid, and various other support agencies to make sure that everybody who can get away is in the position to get away, and all has the opportunity to get away. We've got new legislation as well, obviously, that we deal with in relation to the coercive control, and that's a real concern of ours at the moment in terms of, because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and it's very difficult to break that cycle. But as soon as somebody puts their head above the parapet to look for support, we'll offer them every bit of support that we can possibly do to get them out of that situation.
Okay, it's just I had heard something like if you go to supermarkets and just say is Isabel in or something, then they know that's a coded message for help. But I don't know if we're doing something like that. There
is help available at that in pubs. And there's other things that are available. But as I say, everybody who puts themselves out there to get help will be supported, absolutely. And it's not always the first time that they take help. It sometimes can be 3 or 4, maybe more times before they eventually take that final step.
Yeah, that's about the coercive control, right?
Yeah.
Enough. But yeah, I understand. Thanks for that comment. Josh, your hand was down, now it's back up.
Yeah, it's just to pick up a point of clarification in Councillor Faulkner's question. Isn't the case that we're doing away with community wardens? There's a proposal that we're consulting on at the moment to remove the estates element of the community wardens team, and that represents just one part of the provision, the investigative provision, which incidentally is the majority of the community warden provision, will continue if the saving is approved after consultation. And secondly, just this is a point I was going to raise and I took my hand down, just on the point that Councillor Lowe raised about antisocial behaviour in Edelwood. That's something that's been picked up with me through various constituents, so if you could, I'd appreciate it if I could be involved in the discussions there. I'm sure John Ross has also been involved in the discussions too, so if we could pick that back up as well, I'd appreciate that.
I think you probably would benefit from a hub meeting, an online meeting with the officers in question, a ward meeting. Possibly help. Yeah.
Mary, there's no problem for Josh and that, with Alex and Roger.
Yeah, I know that.
Let me tell Alan, it would be good to bring back the Child Safety Initiative, Alan, in Hull House.
Thanks for that.
I was part of that, Chair. I was part of that when police started right at the very, very start, some 23, 4 years ago.
There you go. Right, I've got Andy's been taking his hand down and putting it back up, but Andy's got his hand back up. So Andy, you can come in now if you wish.
Yeah, I'm needing a course on how to work a computer, Mary. Thank you. Okay, just want to make a couple of comments and then, a couple of questions, which one of has already been answered in part by Councillor Faulkner. On the quad bikes, I welcome this initiative. In fact, I was involved in this to a very small degree, and the success and the pat in the back must go to Councillor Greenshields for obtaining the vast majority of the funding for this. I had the opportunity to go and attend one of the training sessions along with the officers, and I thought it was only a matter of sitting on these quad bikes and away you go. Good grief, was I educated in as much as what was involved and sitting the right way, going round the corner, and you name it, and climbing hills so that it doesn't tip over. It's a lot involved in it, but thankfully the officers that attended that day, they were appreciative of it, and they're looking forward to going out to it once the weather permits them to do so. So thankfully on that. I would like to make a comment and congratulate the team in Larkhall for the two instances that you brought up regarding the apprehension of the burglar, which I am aware of, and also the drugs involved in sorting that one out. So again, the work is fantastic for the team. To come back to the question about the community wardens, I know it's a proposal, right? But I share the views of Councillor Falconer on that. It would be sad to lose that facility. So the other thing was on the 20 hotspots that you mentioned in particular, right? That I assume is in all different areas of South Lanarkshire. I would be interested to know, and I'm quite sure some of my colleagues would be, if it's in their wards. So is there any possibility these could be highlighted to the members of the committee?
That come in right back. It was soaking.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Andy. I'm going to bring in Maureen now.
Thanks, Mary. It's actually more an observation for the police, and thanks for your presentation. It's really quite interesting. It's all what it actually is. I just wondered if it was a change in policy. It used to be in the past when there was an incident within your ward, the elected members would get a phone call quite quickly just to give us a basic background of what happened. Now, there's been two incidents within my ward, and first of all, the first one, it took 5 days for you to get in contact with us, and actually the second one, I still haven't had anything. I fully appreciate the confidentiality and all the rest of it, but because you're not out and about the same now, because we're not supposed to be, it really would have been quite good even just to get a bit of information coming from yourselves with regard to that, rather than having to find out on Facebook exactly what's happening, incidents happening in your ward. Thanks.
Thanks, Maureen. Does one of the officers, is that just an observation that the police will take up?
I just wondered if there was a change in policy, Mary, as well.
No, there's not a change in policy, Councillor. It just is, unfortunately, that we've obviously dropped the ball on a couple of occasions. If that is the case, there will be times where, as you say, it's an ongoing incident and we won't be releasing anything at that time because of. But however, I do understand the need, and our commander is really sensitive to the needs of the elected members and what they should be getting told and when they should be getting told it, to make sure that they can answer questions from constituents. But yeah, I'll take that on board, and thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thanks very much. Andy, can you take your hand down if that's a legacy hand? And Maureen, yourself. That's great. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to come in?
Chair, it's Alan. Just a point of information you're on about the gender violence. There was a programme in Politics London on Sunday where they're using a system where the person affected is into the chemist and says AMI, which means action needed immediately. And they're using chemists. And think the fact that chemists will have rooms to dispose of some drugs in that might be a kind of thing we should look at. It seems it's quite good success in London. Then our Steve House is doing that.
Yep. Is that something that you could take up, Lex?
Yeah, I'll speak to domestic abuse unit in relation to that. I know that there is things and codes, etc. that
so do I.
And it's obviously something that we don't publish so that perpetrators of domestic abuse don't get to hear about them, and it's kind of very much a victim-centred and victim-based approach we have to adopt.
That's great. Can also say that, for the record, Elizabeth Ann, Councillor Callaghan's joined the meeting. Are you aware for the minutes?
Yes, I have that.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to come in before we move on? Alan, your hand's still up. You're muted, Alan.
I'm fine, Chair.
Right, that's fine.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, it only gives me the pleasure of thanking the police for their presentation. I know it's a very, very difficult job out there at the moment, and it is really appreciated you taking the time to come along and give us those informed reports. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everybody, and I'll speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the neighbourhood planning update, which is a report dated the 12th of January by the Executive Director, and you've got the report in your papers. And I've got Rhonda. Rhonda going to present this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly, and thanks for having me along. Can I apologise before I start? I'm hopeful that my internet connection is going to be stable enough to stay with you, but it's been a little bit variable for the last wee while, so if I disappear, please forgive me and I'll come straight back as soon as I can, and I'll message the clerk. So the paper in front of you is in respect of the neighbourhood planning work, which has been going on in the Hamilton and surrounding areas for you to have a look at. What we wanted to do was update you around the progress we're making with neighbourhood planning. There's a couple of new plans from the last few months for you to note, and some annual reports on some of the existing plans. And we wanted to give you a bit of information on the next steps that we have planned for neighbourhood planning within the area as well. So if I could take you through the report, section 3 gives you the background, which I'm sure you're well familiar with, of the introduction of neighbourhood planning, partly in response to the Community Empowerment Act requirements around planning alongside communities to improve outcomes where there was a problem with that, and partly in response to a local desire to go further than that in the way that we're working with communities to identify and progress their own priorities. Section 4 is progress which has been made to date. So the original pilot phases which we looked at, are phase 1, I suppose, would be more appropriate now than pilot, where we're at, included some of the priority areas, and sorry if I skip ahead, sorry, I've mixed myself up there. If I take you to 4.2, 4.2 is looking at the new areas before I go to the existing phase 1 areas to talk about the plans there. So we've been working in several areas, and you'll see the two that are particularly applicable for your own area committee are in Ward 15 in Blantyre and in Fair Hill in Hamilton South, as well as some in the Camblen area. What we noticed from the phase 1 work is that each community is very different. Their starting point is different, their needs are different, and their capacity is different as well. So the reports that you will see from each community will vary in terms of content and in style. Blantyre, for example, prior to moving to work officially in Blantyre, had worked alongside Coalfields Regeneration Trust, and they had produced their own community plan from there. So we're now looking at how do we support the community to implement the plan that was produced for Blantyre, and that includes working online and in other ways with them over the next few months, and going back to have a look at the priorities that they identified and talk to them to make sure that they're still current. And obviously there's been a lot of changes in communities over the course of the pandemic as well. Are there other things we need to be considering and supporting them with? Fair Hill is a new plan using our own processes. So we worked with Fair Hill community. They had a extended consultation phase. Originally they planned to end it earlier than they did, but due to the extended phase, we ended up with just under half of all the households in the area getting engaged in the process, which was really good. And we came up with a plan looking at the top 3 themes of physical environment improvement, leisure, recreation and social opportunities, and greater community safety. So we have obviously had some difficulties with the pandemic in terms of engaging, holding online meetings and getting attendance along there, but we've launched the plan. We had a copy delivered to every household in the area towards the end of the year in December, and we're continuing to talk with the community members there about what do we do to move it forward, bearing in mind the situation and the other priorities that they're facing around the pandemic as well. Then Lark Hall again is a totally different approach. Lark Hall was very much completely community driven. We've worked as a team to support them in the creation of an overall Lark Hall plan. There is an existing neighbourhood plan for part of Lark Hall, which is identified from the process of looking at outcomes, but this plan covers the whole of Lark Hall and some of the surrounding areas. Again, there were some delays there, as can only be expected, but the launch for that was an online launch on the 3rd of December, with really well attended by community members, and the Lark Hall plan again is included for you to have a look at and see the priorities coming from that area. If I now skip back to the existing neighbourhood plans, so there were 3 areas that were originally in phase 1. One of them was in Rutherglen and Cambuslang. Other 2, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, Hill House, Udston and Burnbank, and then the neighbourhoods in Lark Hall, Strotherhill and Birkinshaw. So we've been continuing to work with those areas. We've produced the first annual report, which is a requirement for us to feed back the communities and the work that's happened there. And again, those 2 annual reports are included in your appendices for you to have a look at. One of the key things that was beginning to develop was the increase in participation we were seeing in the areas, particularly the number of people who were getting involved in discussions around participatory budgeting and how to spend small amounts of money in the local areas. Again, section 6 outlines the difficulties that we did have due to the pandemic. So many of the groups had ceased to meet because of the circumstance. And for us as a team and our partners, a lot of the work was redirected towards supporting the response within communities. So that tied us up for a considerable number of months. However, we've now begun to engage again with communities using online sessions. As I said, Fair Hill, the plan's been launched and delivered to the community. Lark Hall held an online launch for their plan, and we're continuing to work with each of the communities to engage as much as we can and to find the ways that are going to work for individual areas to progress their own plans. So this is very individualised and quite intensive as a result of that, and finding ways to keep this work pressing forward. And we've also had a look at where do we need to be focusing some attention on. So in 6.3, some of the areas we haven't addressed from the original work, the identified areas were Whitehill, some of Low Waters and some of Edelwood. And we have started work with them. Whitehill in particular has quite a strong and active community, and the work's progressing there. Low Waters and Edelwood again are different. They do have active communities, but they're directing their attention towards more pandemic work in some other areas. So what we're doing is we're keeping in touch with the groups, we're talking to them, and we're looking at how can we support them to move forward to create neighbourhood plans and appropriate speed for those areas. So there's quite a lot in there for you to consider, especially with the appendices, which give a great deal of detail in the work in the 4 areas that are included. But I'm happy to take any questions that anybody's got.
Thanks for that, Rhonda. I have a few hands up. So I've got Jackie Burns first. Jackie, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Rhonda, just an obvious point, I think, for me about the community engagement. I took part in the Strotherhill and Birkinshaw place of a plan meeting last night, and it was quite interesting that apart from myself, there was only 1 community member attended, participated, another 5 were either staff of the council or partners of the council. So I think the key thing is about trying to encourage continually about local people participating and engaging with us. And I know the challenges of that, but it becomes even more difficult now because of the COVID, and trying to get people who can't come out the house but to actually engage Zoom meetings. One of the issues that was raised, and it was on the minute of the meeting last night, was about engagement with construction businesses. You know, there's 3 building sites in Larkhall just now, and one of the issues we had maybe about 18 months ago, a meeting with Lavelle, who were less than helpful in actually coming to a meeting, turned up late, couldn't wait to get away. I think they were patronising, but they weren't fully engaging with community representatives. It was almost as if they were there because they were asked to be there and they better be there. But the point I'm trying to emphasise is, given the issue of community benefits and the Section 75 agreements from planning, there is money coming into Larkhall that the local people and even councillors are not able to shape, because planning manage it, then decide how it's going. And we know that much of it is going to build the new Robert Smiley nursery, that it's going to upgrade the new Glengown nursery, road repairs and all that stuff. It's just about the engagement with local people to try and shape the agenda and try and listen to what's happening. And I think there's a gap there between the council and its staff and the local community. And I think that's something maybe we want to look at in the coming weeks and months, Rhonda. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Jackie.
Sorry, if it's okay if I respond to some of that, Councillor Donnelly, thank you. So absolutely, the team had, obviously I wasn't at last night's meeting, but they came back and said about the attendance not being too great. To put it mildly, you know, it's quite disappointing that the numbers were low. So it's definitely something we're considering. Some of what we're looking at for other areas is going back to the good old phone and phone calls to people. The difficulty with that is the group conversation suffers because you have to have one-to-one conversations. But how can we keep people linked in, keep them part of a discussion and a dialogue when perhaps they don't either have the facilities or the confidence or the desire necessarily to be on a video call because of whatever else is going on. So we are very much aware of that. There is no easy answer, as you said, but we're continuing to work on it. In terms of the planning, now obviously that's not my area of expertise, but what I will do is have a chat to Anne and the team that are working there and see whether we can maybe get somebody from our planning team who would be willing to come to a meeting, which might be then of interest to other community members and encourage them to come and hear about how that works. So we can have a look at that as a kind of specific action around that area, see if it was of any help.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you.
That helpful, Jackie? Your hand's still up. I'll move on to Bert.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions there. Could you tell me Rhonda, how many officers are involved, for example, for the likes of Blantyre? I'm looking at my own area here, and diversity in Blantyre and other places. We've got people, and we're glad we've got them that want to be involved, but it seems to be the same people involved in everything. How can we get a bit of diversity? And I mean, they're basically get younger people involved in a good cross-section of the community. And the third thing is, people are under the illusion we've got millions to spend. You got to give us a sort of ballpark figure realistically of what we've got to spend in this area, 18,000 people. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of our staffing resource, and what I would stress is that our staffing resource is only the facilitation for this, and it really is a process that requires every council resource to be involved and all of our partners as well as the community to make it work. But we do have an officer and an assistant dedicated to the Hamilton area full time. So they're working across several areas, and we have the assistant who has a considerable period this week dedicated towards Blantyre. So we're looking to resource it as best we can, given the demands on us as a service as well. In terms of engagement, we're very aware that there's a lot of work now. In normal circumstances, we would be operating very differently. We would be out in the community. We would be looking at where are people. So I know we'd already, through Tony, who's the assistant that works there, he had attended many of the different groups. But we was also engaging with the schools, looking at how can we go and talk to parents, how can we get to people who may be not involved in groups and have that wider spread. That's obviously slightly constrained again because of the situation that we're in. We can't go out and do that kind of physical face-to-face work. But Tony's looking at how do we make use of other services. So there are a lot of our partners who are in touch with people who are maybe users of services but wouldn't regard themselves as being involved in these type of processes. What we want to do is use every available opportunity, including yourselves as councillors and the reach that you have in your constituents, to make people aware of the opportunity and to be able to contribute in different ways. So for some people that might be feeding back a few comments, you know, they might have something specific they want to say. For some people it might be that they want to get really involved in a stakeholder group, and you know, we're looking at identifying that range of opportunities for people as well, so they don't feel either that they're being marginalised and excluded from the process, or that they're having to be sucked into, you know, a load of work effectively that they're not up for too. It is, I'll go back to saying again, at the moment it is very much a challenge for us, but it's not one that we're shrinking away from, but we're certainly trying to do the best that we can in the circumstances around it. The third part of your question was around budget. So the work that we are doing is looking at how do we allocate resources across the partnership, rather than coming in maybe in some of the work that was carried out in the past where it was a grant programme or a specific budget that went into an area. This is about how do we shape services and how do we work with communities to deliver things between us and across the partnership that really meet their needs. So I know that you're probably looking for me to give you a figure of a budget, and that unfortunately is not the way that we're working. We have the resources of the partnership in terms of the whole CPP sitting behind the work, and everybody in the CPP has signed up to this process. So where there's a need identified, it's then working with the partners to see how to best resource that, and that might be staffing resource, it might be working to support the community and delivering something, it might be that there is a need for a budget allocation to go into an area from a particular service or resource. It really is about that broader thinking around it that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate what you say. Is it just that in the real world, unfortunately, that's what people ask. It's one of the common questions I've been receiving. I don't know about other councillors. Is how much money is there? What can we do with this? I mean, if somebody says to me, do you think we get £120,000 for a new youth centre, for example? They realistically believe we can deliver a lot, and it's just that the expectation is very high. And I think some have got to be realistic, and we've got to get that across the community, because I think a lot of people are thinking they're going to deliver maybe more than we can. That was all. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Let me come back in again. Sorry, it was just to say that one of obviously there's other places that can fund activity as well as through the council and through local funding. So we're working to identify priorities. It does give the community a stronger hand. They decide that, you know, to take the youth centre, for example, you know, if they decided that was a priority and they've got the work behind it, consulting with the community that shows that that's a real need, then that gives them a strong hand when looking for other funding as well. So what we hope is that this opens up doors to other opportunities that are broader as part of the work as well.
Thanks, Rhonda. I'm always one for opening up doors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. I'm going to move on to Peter. Peter, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Larkhall community for the work that they did in producing that plan. Huge amount of work they put into that. They're absolutely gutted at the fact that they didn't get to present it in person, but that's COVID for you. I'd also like to say to Rhonda, or give my thanks to her team for the work that they've been doing over all of this the pandemic period. When this first hit, I was thinking that, you know, how are we going to be able to handle, because it was obviously a huge crisis for people throughout the whole of South Lanarkshire. And to my delight, I could say that the community engagement officers stepped right in and made a huge difference to how the whole campaign of help was shaped along with our communities. So I don't know where we would have been had we not had your team ready and available at that point on us. So I'd like you to take my thanks, and I'm sure there's plenty of other councillors who would agree with me. The work they've done has been invaluable, and our communities have benefited greatly from that work. Hopefully, we're going to carry on in the vein that we're going with the engagement team. I'm very pleased with way it's shaping up and the help that's coming out to communities. On the communications side, what Bert and I believe Jackie as well, talking about communication, there's an opportunity here by using technology. It's always been the case that the same people turn up at the same meetings, normally retired people, and there's a good reason behind that, and that's because if you're a mother with a young family at 7 o'clock in the evening, you just ain't going to make it. So there's a huge opportunity through the use of technology to bring more people in, and I'm sure the community engagement team are looking at ways of doing that, but that would be a huge help for a whole section of our communities who want to engage but can't possibly because of the timings and family commitments and everything else. So that's really all. It was I just had to make sure that your team were appreciated, and I'm sure other councillors will say the same thing. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks for that, Peter. Yeah, I was going to do a wee bit at the end. Josh, you wanting to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And Peter stole a lot of my thunder.
Yeah.
Aye, so I welcome the work that's been you guys have undertaken in Fairhill to develop the community plan, and you can see right the way through it the amount of work that's been in, and the number of respondents as well proves that there's a lot of buy-in from the local people. Over half is a testament to the work that you guys have undertaken over the past year and a bit. And I think that local buy-in is obviously vital as we move forward with our ambition to start mainstreaming participatory budgeting. We know that through other reports that Fairhill has its challenges, and that they've been exacerbated by COVID. I think about a third of the adult residents in Fairhill are now claiming some form of universal credit, and as I say, COVID's obviously exacerbated that. But one of the positives, or one of the the silver linings of the pandemic, has been the increased community engagement over the course of the last few months, and I know that you guys are working to try and ensure that we capitalise on that. And you mentioned Edelwood in the report too, and John, I'm sure John will come in and say the same thing. We've been working with the Edelwood Community Action Group led by Karen Madden, who's been engaging with Craig, and they're really keen now to move beyond just COVID response and into becoming a more constituted group, that provides a different range of services to the community and also becomes that voice, because Edelwood used to be well represented in terms of the community organisations, and that sort of fell away well before my time. So it's good to see that coming back. I think this sort of work will be instrumental in ensuring that continues. So I welcome it. Pass on my thanks to Craig. Craig's been fantastic over the course of the last few months in terms of working with the Hamilton COVID Warriors, who were newly established, that provided prescriptions and food support to communities across Hamilton, and has also been instrumental in assisting with the Edelwood Community Action Group and their formation and some of the work that they have managed to do. So yeah, really appreciate the work that you do, and I look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thanks for that, Josh. I'm sure Rhonda will take back the comments. John, do you want to come in now?
Yes, please, although there's probably very little left for me to say, which is probably a good thing. One of the things that I would say to Rhonda is that I was heavily involved in the Fairhill Fairsay. Lynn and attended most of the meetings, and it was really well represented by a number of members of the community. And maybe to allay Bert's fears a wee bit, your team are very good at sussing out representatives from all areas of local community, from the young right through to the old, from church organisations to non-church organisations. And that's the whole idea. If you're going to take this forward, you really need to be representative of an area. And that's not just a community council, that's everybody in that area. And your team are exceptionally good. They've got the skills to do that. So yeah, I have no problem. After seeing how the team were working in Fairhill. I was absolutely delighted with the way that it's taken forward. It's just my heart goes out to your whole team at this present time, because you're not able to do the things that you would want to do to take these things forward as quickly as we'd like to see it happen. But even in the short time, although it's not on the official list at the present time, even the participation with Edelwood and taking that forward sort of below the radar is happening. So, you know, I'm really happy with what's happening at the present time. And as Josh said, once a community gets itself together, they've got the willingness to say what they want from the council. And not only if they get buy-in to participatory budgeting, as we hope, but they also then can get buy-in from other organisations to fund things that they would like to do as a community. So all strength to your arm, and I hope that you continue with the good work that you're doing at the present time.
Thanks, John. Stephanie, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Mary. I have got a few questions. First of all, Whitehill, really good to hear you mention Whitehill, and Brian McQuillan's been doing a great job. Whitehill have got a really strong community. There's lots of people go to the neighbourhood board, different things like that. But even Whitehill have struggled a wee bit just now during the pandemic, you know, with engagement and stuff too. Burnbank Hudson Hill House, which has obviously been going for quite a wee while now, has had fantastic feed-in from the community. But again, there's a bit of a struggle there just now as well, just because of the circumstances. So I'm not worried about the approach that we've got, and I think these difficulties we've got at this point in time are just, you know, incredibly hard to overcome. But it's good to hear about the idea of making some phone calls and stuff too there. I know with Burnbank Hudson Hill House, there had been a few queries coming forward when we were talking about, you know, how to actually get the engagement to be able to access the participatory budgeting money, and I'm wondering if that's something that's been kind of picked up on. Also, Burnbank, you know, has been, Josh is saying, you know, about Fairhill being hard hit. I think Burnbank's actually our top community for being hardest hit by the pandemic. It's been, you know, it's been a real hammer blow to the people that live there, who are already in difficult circumstances. But one of the things that I wanted to raise was kind of from the outset, one of the things I've said is that, you know, actually Hill House and Burnbank are quite different communities. And I would really like to have kind of assurances that going forward it's about our communities deciding who their neighbourhoods are. And but I wanted to ask whether there was a possibility of looking at separating that down at one point in time. Now, it's not something, I mean, can you go and do this just now? This has to happen right away, because I know there's been a lot of real positivity and a lot of really good work going on around there, that there's restrictions on using Gilmore Church, etc. just now too, that we don't know when they'll come through, with the police on earlier as well, speaking about doing the food bank and stuff. So there's been loads and loads of good stuff, but they are quite separate communities. And the final thing that I wanted to ask is if, you know, going forward we could have some people along from the communities themselves too to actually talk to us and give us their views directly about, you know, what's been happening from their point of view firsthand, from their perspective, and the progress that's been getting made. And finally, just a huge thank you to all the members of your team and all the work that's going in from our communities as well. It's been absolutely amazing. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. I would like to totally echo the going forward, the Hill House and Burnbank communities, as I've raised it right for the start. And I think it is something that we clearly need to deal with going forward for the communities, so that we are listening to them, and it is a voice that they have expressed. They are totally, entirely different communities. I was brought up in it, so I totally get it. And they are, and at the moment, Hill House is very, very community orientated, whereas we're really still struggling with Burnbank. And I know Whitehill has managed to get there as well, which is good. But there's the wee pot in the middle with Burnbank, and they obviously need a lot of work to get them into the community spirit going forward. But without that,
can I let Rhonda come back on those, Mary? Thanks.
Yep, and you come, Rhonda.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to everybody for the kind words about the team. They are an incredible bunch of people. You know, they have really worked incredibly. I'm very, very proud of them. and beyond them to the partners that they've worked with from other parts of the council that we might never have came into contact with normally. You know, people who normally would do school runs for children with additional needs and things like that, who've just got on boards and been fantastic. And then out to the partners in the community, where I think the word we keep using is phenomenal, and it doesn't even cover the response that we've had from our communities. But I will certainly pass on to the team your thanks, so that's really appreciated. Coming back to the questions, and excuse me if I've taken a note of them, but if I've missed one, just flag it up again. First of all, around the kind of geographical areas, you're absolutely right. Hill House, Udston and Burnbank were part of phase one, or kind of pilot communities. The process we use now, I mean, this was the biggest piece of learning, I would say, from what happened in that phase. The process we use now is we put a map in front of people very early on and say, tell us where your community or your neighbourhood is. It's easier to do in person again. We actually put a physical map on the table and give them marker pens and let them, you know, go at it and see. And sometimes, I think White Hill's one of the ones where there is real agreement because it's quite a defined area. You can see where the roads close it. Sometimes it can be quite interesting where people view communities starting and ending, but the consensus in that comes from the communities themselves rather than us or anybody else sitting with a map in the office now. So there's certainly scope to go back and have a look at how we deal with that area going forwards, because the needs are very different. So it's something that we can consider, and maybe have a conversation with the groups about how do we do that. I think there were some strengths in the approach as well in terms of bringing together communities, building bridges across different communities, and the kind of support that came in there. But it's certainly something I know has been flagged repeatedly since I started as causing some issues, and you can see the differences in what's happening in each area, so we can have a look at that. Having community reps along to speak to yourselves would be fantastic. I would love to do that. We can have a look at who we've got that might be willing and able to do that at a future meeting. I'm sure you won't, any of you take this the wrong way. It can be slightly intimidating for a community member bringing them to a room or an online room effectively that's full of councillors. So we'd want to make sure that we worked with them so that they were confident when they did that. But there are some extremely able and confident and vocal and articulate people who I'm sure would love to come and speak to you about their experiences. And that's the good, the bad and the ugly of those experiences, because we're learning as we go through it. So we will take where the opportunity comes to improve things from everybody as we go. The last one was in relation to the PB, I think, that I've noted down. So when we spoke about the budgets in terms of Blantyre, I think I was thinking in terms of, kind of service budgets and so on. Within my section, we have a very small budget to support the neighbourhood planning work, and we've allocated that between the 9 areas for this year. Kind of worked on it in terms of looking at the population of the areas to make it as fair as we can, and worked with Paul to check that he was happy the way we've done that. It amounts to a few £1,000s for each area, so it really is kind of seed corn funding almost, is to get people involved in thinking about the priorities and give them a little bit of money so that they can start developing some of the priorities. But it's not the be all and end all of neighbourhood planning process. I just wanted to make that really clear. This money isn't what neighbourhood planning spends. This money is to help facilitate the process into the bigger service delivery discussion. We have had some chats about that as a team. I think across each of the areas we're working in just now, we'll probably end up with a different approach this year. The key thing we want to do is make sure that we get the money out to the community and that something's happening with it to address the priorities. So where one of the real benefits of the grants, the small grants PB in the past has been bringing lots of people into a room to have a discussion, we can't do that. It is really unfortunate, but we'll be looking at how can we get as many people involved in a discussion as possible, or can we find a way to carry that small amount of money over in the area somehow so that we can have the discussion over a longer period of time? And there will be proposals for each area that we'll look at that will be unique. So I think that was everything I've noted. I'm sorry if I've missed any points that you raised.
No, Rhonda, that's great.
That's great.
It was just kind of, we'd had the discussions around kind of like having the evidence behind the decisions that were being made about that small amount of money just now as well, and worrying that we weren't quite going to meet that and stuff. So that's really quite reassuring to hear that. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is your hand still up, Stephanie? You okay? Right. Andy, your hand's still up. Are you wanting to come in?
Yes, thanks, Mary. Just to endorse what Councillor Craig had said earlier on, I would like to pass on my thanks as well to your team for the tremendous amount of work that they've been doing over the last 10 months in the Strotherhill and Larkhall area. Right. On communication with the community, I've been talking with Liz Jimison of the team, and we've managed to secure a notice board for those people who unfortunately don't have access to a computer, etc. This notice board is going to be situated with the cooperation of the 101 company in Craigbank Road in Larkhall. So the message can be put there for any information that people can't access on a computer. So hopefully that's going to encourage people, or at least let them know what's going on and what the team are doing. So I look forward to that, and that should be installed within the next 2 weeks. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. That's a great initiative. And I like the idea of groups coming to the area committee meeting and maybe talking about their particular neighbourhood plan. So that is something to go forward with. Would be very useful with the support of your team, Rhonda. And it leaves me just to say that I think it's been magnificent, the team and the work that they've done in the communities. I know in my area in Hill House in Udston, it's been really, really valuable. So much so that the community council's looking at how they actually engage with the Udston people, and they're looking at their boundaries so that they can do that and put that proposal. So it's opened their doors a wee bit. Burnbank is too far, but Udston is in the area of the ward, so they were thinking that might be quite useful going forward. So you've taken them out the box and had them thinking a bit broader, and the community groups are working more in a way that they never worked before. They worked in isolation, so they're now working in tandem with each other going forward. So that's actually had a plus as well. So thanks very much for that, and thanks very much to the team.
Chair, I've got my hand up.
Oh,
Chair,
sorry.
My hand's been up and down in these laptops.
Right. Okay,
obviously, after the Lord Mayor.
You're muted, Alan.
Quality stuff. Is that me, Chair?
That's you. That's you.
As I said, after the Lord Mayor's show comes the dust cart of somebody who's lived in an area of deprivation now on 30 years. I'll start with Peter's assertion that young mothers who want to come along to meetings can't do they can do it online. Online isn't a good idea, as we're seeing with the amount of families that haven't got laptops to get their kids educated. In actual fact, 68% of low-income families don't have access to an iPhone or a laptop. But my main point is on the report. There's 2 or 3 things to mention, Chair. The report is done by the Executive Director of Finance, who I understand is the Deputy Chief Executive member of the Corporate Management team, which has produced the budget that's gone into consultation. And I look down in 3.1 of this. The Community Empowerment Scotland Act is a statutory act, right? And it makes it clear in 3.2 that its participation with communities must lie at the heart of community planning, requires specific attention to be more than just consultation, but involve active engagement and empowerment. We're going to the next page in 4.2, the new neighbourhood plans, Rutherglen Central, Cambuslang East, Lancashire and Hamilton. Cambuslang East, right? And the deputy director for that, or the executive director, Cambuslang East, he wants to take away a family centre, a proposal. I don't know if he's consulted the people around, you can tell me. Blantyre, right? Blantyre, they've already took a home away there and never consulted the people. They're proposing to take a day centre away. Excuse me.
No, I need to
stop me.
I do.
Why?
Because this is not the business of this meeting, and they aren't being taken away. They're up for consultation. I can't hear you.
Good, just leave them on mute.
Yeah, I'm going to go on.
No, yeah, you're exactly by that before. Mary.
Alan, I'm going to move to the next item.
Councillor Faulkner, you're on mute again.
Mommy. Right, that's me, Mary. Well, can I say that we've been asked to approve this paper, okay? Community Empowerment Scotland Act. At the budget meeting, we will be asked to approve the things. So we could actually be shutting, take Stephanie's place, the family centre in Burnbank, the library in Burnbank.
Alan, this is not the discussion for that. This is not the place for that discussion.
So we'll break the law when we do the budget.
No.
We will break the law.
That is not the discussion for here. Okay?
Well, I think it is as a committee. We are
and it's a
point of order. Point of
Yeah,
order.
it's not
Alan,
political.
and this is in relation to order. The standing orders state that when the chair makes a decision, that decision's final, and if you had participated in the budget talks, you would be aware, or if your group had participated in the budget talks, you'd be aware that we're currently undergoing consultation as is set down in legislation. So my point is in relation to the standing orders, and the standing orders clearly state that the chair's decision is final.
Chair, can I come back there?
No, I'm saying that you're not
I'm
coming in.
shocked, Chair. I'm shocked. The lack of transparency here.
Well, that's one thing I've got,
That's
Alan.
a
I can
statutory
assure
law.
you. Alan, I'm going to be standing orders, okay? And I'm ruling that that's not the discussion for this meeting, okay?
Okay, we'll discuss it with the advertiser.
Thank you. We're now on to the community grant applications.
Thanks, Rhonda.
The community grant applications, as Rhonda, do you want to speak to these, or?
Chair, it's myself that will just
Or is it
quickly
yourself?
quickly
Sorry
speak to
about
this
that,
report.
Stuart. Right, on you
Thanks,
come.
Chair. So, as well as requesting approval of community grants, the report also provides an update in terms of funding provided to groups that supported their communities in terms of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
As advised at the previous meeting, the closing date for applications for these grants was the 31st of December, with any remaining funds from the £5,000 allocated to COVID-19 grants being returned to the generic community grants budget. The report provides details of the action taken by the Executive Director of Finance and Corporate Resources in consultation with the Chair to allocate grants to support the COVID-19 response. Total of these grants awarded amounted to £4,802.95, leaving a balance of £197.05 to be returned to the generic community grants budget. I'd therefore conclude by recommending that the community grants detailed at recommendation 1 be approved, and also ask that members note the grants awarded to support community groups for COVID-19 response as detailed at recommendation 2. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I would move in block that we support those recommendations.
Agreed.
Thank you. And I've got no other business, and I'd like to thank you for attending today's meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda.
Well, thank you, Chair.
Vote of thanks for the Chair.
Democracy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.